I'm so happy to be here with my dear friend, Dr. Serena H. Chen, the MedAnswers team. We are doing Monday Motivations. Every week we tackle a topic that sometimes is tough to talk about as it relates to fertility in the field of IVF. Today's is one that is a little bit heartbreaking to me personally. One of our patients who was going through egg freezing, she went in for her retrieval, Serena, and they said, "You already ovulated." How does that, first of all, can we address the science of it? Okay, last week we talked about stats and not being the statistic bubble over your head, but this is a real human, a real person. This is not a statistic. How does it even happen that you can ovulate before the retrieval happens?
So this used to happen all the time when, like way back when we first started, because we would have to just monitor for ovulation. And then Lupron was invented, and then antagonists like ganirelix and cetrotide were invented, and now we have much better cycle control, and those drugs work really well to suppress the release of LH from the pituitary gland. But they're not 100%. They definitely don't work 100%, but they work pretty darn well. So I would say on average that, the chance of this happening is less than 1%, because like we do close to 1,000 cycles a year, and it maybe like just a few a year this happens, and it's obviously devastating when it happens, because
nobody wants to be the less than 1%. You want to be less than 1% if you end up with a baby and nobody thought you were going to have a baby, but not in this case. What do you do then to adjust if it happens, only a handful of times? Is there something particular that you look to that you think, do you just monitor 5 hours beforehand to make sure it's in the window? Is it usually off by like an hour or by like 6 hours?
Those are really good questions. I'm not really sure. Sometimes we can tell when somebody's high risk and we feel like, okay, their levels are looking like they could potentially be at risk for ovulating early. And then we sometimes, if it's inevitable and we can't prevent it, then sometimes we can convert to an IUI cycle instead of an IVF cycle.
Got it.
Something like that.
That makes sense.
We can prevent it. We can be like, okay, double your dose, take an extra dose of your drug.
Right.
Sometimes people start to ovulate because they actually forget to take a drug. They just miss a dose, and we'll call them up and say, hey, did you remember to take your ganirelix today? Because it looks like your LH level is going up. And we'll often get, because this is a common thing to happen. You're taking a lot of drugs and you forget, and the patient will be like, oh my gosh, I forgot, I'll take it right now. And then everything is fine.
Wow. Okay. So it does work that quickly that you can catch it. It does work that fast, where as long as it's kind of same day that you forgot a dose, you can still get it in same day, and it'll drop your LH back so that your body's like, don't ovulate. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So things that I've heard so far is that sometimes it's that a patient forgot to take a medication and they can get it in same day. So being rigorous with the medication schedule is critical when you're going through a cycle.
Yes.
In other cases,
now, but having said that, though, you don't have to torture yourself and take the medication at exactly the same time every day. So when we say, okay, take it this evening, like a lot of practices will say, well, I'll try to take it around 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Like, they'll give you a time, but you're usually plus or minus 2 hours with those medications.
Got it. So there is a window. So to be not to be so religious with it.
It's not the only thing that's super precise is the HCG shot or the trigger shot. HCG or Lupron, that we do want you to take at the right time. And if you're going to be off by a little bit, it's better to be off a little bit later than off a little bit earlier. Because what everybody's trying to do is time it for about like 34, 35, 36 hours. It depends on the lab, prior to your egg retrieval time. And, that way we're creating this, theoretically the eggs should be mature, but not released during that period of time.
Right. So in this case, the patient did report to me that they did ask her to go an extra day with the regular medications because they wanted them to grow a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So in growing them a little bit bigger, the size couldn't possibly trigger an LH surge that
Well,
has to
the
either,
further out you push, theoretically, the higher the risk of releasing on your own. And so there's kind of a window where, you don't want to give HCG too early, and you don't want to give HCG too late. And there is this myth out there that if we keep pushing and pushing and pushing, then, we'll get more and more smaller follicles. But meanwhile, you're overcooking your larger follicles. So
right.
there's a window at which it's like, we're so focused on numbers, but more is not necessarily better
Yeah, I get
if
that.
we're doing something
Okay.
bad to your egg quality.
Oh, I get that. And when you're faced with a patient that only has 7,
Right.
she's just trying to grow 7, and this is actually to freeze eggs. So we don't,
Yeah.
MedAnswers typically helps people who are struggling to conceive. This is a unique case in that regard too, is she was trying to do an all freeze cycle on these eggs. And so if they're looking at the growth, the follicular growth in the ovaries, and they think, oh, well, one more day. So if they retrieve too early, then they might be immature and there'd be nothing to freeze. And growing them too long, then they ran this risk where she ovulated before the retrieval happened.
Yeah. And I will say that the lower your AMH is, the older your chronologic age, the worse your ovarian function is. Those are higher risk factors for early release, despite doing a good job with your medications.
Well, and to top it off on that, I mean, the other risk factor is she is a cancer survivor. So, her body's been through a lot, with chemo.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
Exactly, all kinds of things. So,
but the good news is that if somebody has the opportunity to try again, a lot of times we can learn significantly from the previous cycle, and you should be able to sit down with your doctor and say, this was really devastating. I think I can go again, but I don't ever want that to happen again. Can we prevent that? And a lot of times we can take steps to prevent it from happening the next time. So that we usually have learned something. Some people have such poor ovarian function that they can't, but somebody who recruits 7 follicles, theoretically, they should have enough ovarian reserve that I would be optimistic that, I hope that she has another chance to do this, that we could make it better.
Yeah, me too. Now, what are some of those steps that you would take? Would you do more frequent LH blood draws, like the closer that she gets to her retrieval date?
We would probably give the trigger shot earlier.
Got it. Okay.
Definitely give the trigger shot earlier. We would maybe, we often give our antagonist in the evening, but you could give so that means when your trigger shot is you're taking it more than 24 hours after your last, antagonist dose. So you could give another antagonist dose with your HCG shot, or you could switch your antagonist dose to the morning. There's a lot of little tricks that give you, there's a shorter period of time between the antagonist dose and the HCG that might benefit some patients. Some programs just do that for everybody. So there's a lot of different approaches. You may change the drug protocol, but a lot of times it's just, you realize that even though we have a standard trigger time that seems to work for everybody, we often will have to change our trigger criteria based upon the outcome. Like somebody has these very large follicles and yet we still get immature eggs. Sometimes we can change that outcome by changing our criteria for trigger.
I had this happen with a BRCA2 patient too, where she went in and she hadn't ovulated. She actually just had no viable oocytes that grew. And they had, she went in thinking it was a long shot and hoping for one, because she and her husband, were kind of banking on. It was so hard. And I was right there, as she was waking up from anesthesia to help kind of, share that news. And I mean, I'll never forget her face, her grief. I'll never forget the entire experience because it was so incredibly devastating. And, I think that this is why we advocate for people getting in to see you guys so early, right? Because, and trying to set the proper expectation that no matter what you're going in for, whether egg freezing or to have a baby, or even just for evaluation, like know all the facts as young as you possibly can so that you have proper time for decision making. Right. You don't want to be, with your back up against the time wall. And I heard somebody give a talk recently and, they were saying like everybody wants to have babies in their 30s now. That's just not true. There are tens of millions of people that still want to have babies in their 20s and they struggle and they struggle and they struggle and they struggle. For years, they struggle. A lot of them end up being in their 30s. But not because they said, I only want to be a parent in my 30s. It's because it didn't work in their 20s. And we have patients on the platform who've been struggling for 27 months. In some cases, I've seen people, struggle for 7 years and they still haven't seen an IVF specialist. Yeah. And this is the part of our job that is, so important, is that we have to get people in to have these conversations and go, okay, I'm one of the people that is most likely going to need 3 cycles. Whether it's egg freezing or what have you. Let's go into this first cycle as our practice cycle. It pains me to even have to say it that way because of the cash involved most of the time. But that's the harsh reality of the art involved in your science, right?
Yes. That don't have a crystal ball. And a lot of, we learn so much during an IVF cycle. And you're right, a lot of people, to get to the baby, to get the right number of eggs, it's often more than 1 egg retrieval.
Right. And the thing that always also kind of frustrates me about our field is the talk about like, well, standardization. And, that works great, except then we leave out precision, and precision medicine is sometimes in conflict with standardization. Yes. Because one size does not fit all with this. And that's why it takes highly skilled people, wonderful doctors like you who like stay so current on the research, who read the case studies, who still do, journal clubs even with their fellow doctors, things like that to stay really current so that when you're faced with the outliers, you know what to try next. Yeah. Right. And so I think that's my Monday motivation is if you don't feel like your doctor has your back and the first, option failed, then find someone like Dr. Chen, connect with us and find somebody who, gets that, okay, I can look at the facts and this is the thing that I think was missing. Let's do this next. Yeah. Somebody
and I think handle that. You're right. You should be able to have that dialogue with your doctor. It's a disappointing outcome. Nobody wants that for their patient, but you should be able to sit down and face to face and ask all the questions, even if they're difficult or embarrassing ones. And you should be able to get honest answers. And even if you can, like sometimes people just feel better getting another opinion that, and if all it does is validate the other opinion that, that's still a good thing. You want to feel comfortable. Yeah.
Totally worth it because you don't want anybody to walk away feeling like it was a waste of a try. Exactly. Because even if it's just 2 weeks out of their life, if it's 3 weeks, if it's 6 weeks, whatever it is out of their life, it's so much bigger than the time and it's so much bigger than the money. This is an emotionally difficult thing to go through.
Everybody that's tuning in now is watching because that means they're trying to become more educated and more informed. And that's what we're all about is answers, trying to get people some answers and making sure you're really educated and informed. So.
And empowered, right? Yeah, and empowered to have this conversation. So my last question for you before we wrap today is, why is it not possible? I want this distinctly from you. Why is it not possible to know exactly ahead of time that this was going to go wrong? Why can't we know ahead of time that this individual case ovulated before they went into
it is pretty uncommon. And so that's if everybody's taking their medication and we're doing those daily levels, if it just happens, that's pretty unusual. So and the rates are not 100%. So I think it is obviously so disappointed for this person. Yeah. But I think most people need to know that this is an unusual thing that happens. And it's not zero, but the chance is pretty darn low.
I got it. Okay. All right. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Monday Motivation with Serena and Alice. We love doing these. If you have particular topic ideas that you want to do, comment below, shoot us a note on Facebook. And we'll see you next Monday. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye.